So today, we're going to take a step back from the NBA and talk about the NCAA with the March Madness tournament currently underway. This year I picked Houston to win the tournament, but I definitely started sweating my chances of winning my bracket pool after Houston's close win over A&M on Sunday night. One thing I looked up following Houston's win was what year are their starting players in school. Reason being, well, years ago one of the biggest upsets that shocked me was when the 2018-19 Duke Blue Devils lost to Michigan State in the Elite Eight. We're talking about one of just two teams in NCAA history with 3 top 10 draft picks in the same year, yet they couldn't get the job done. While Cam Reddish missed Duke's Sweet 16 game against Virginia Tech and the Elite 8 game they lost against Michigan State, I still felt Duke was talented enough to win without Reddish. And after the game, I remember hearing people criticize the one-and-done model that Coach K began to embrace years earlier, comparing his strategy to John Calipari's early 2010 strategy at Kentucky, and also saying you need to build a team of players who have been in your program for years in order to win a national championship. Well, with that said, I thought back to that after this past weekend's games and now decided to look up the experience level of every player on the last 17 national championship teams and the last 17 runner-ups to the national championship as well. Reason I did the last 17? Well, the 2006 draft was the first NBA draft that allowed college players to enter the draft following their freshman year of college, and there have been 17 NCAA tournaments since then. Well, I'm sure the information we break down today could have helped us all with our brackets a few weeks ago. At least we have this information to go off of for next year's tournament. Now, if we look at the grade or year of every player to start in an NCAA tournament national championship game since 2006, there are 48 seniors, 57 juniors, 38 sophomores, and 27 freshmen. In the last 5 national championship games, there have only been 5 freshmen and 9 sophomores to have started in the championship game, making that 14 underclassmen out of the 50 players who have started in the big game. The last time you had more underclassmen than upperclassmen in a single starting lineup of a team in the national championship game was 9 years ago when the Duke Blue Devils sent out the starting lineup of freshman Tyus Jones, senior Quinn Cook, freshman Justice Winslow, sophomore Matt Jones, and star freshman Jahlil Okafor leading the team, along with their key bench player, a man you may know by the name of Grayson Allen, who was a freshman as well. Sending out starting 5s full of underclassmen was a pretty common thing at the time though, as in every championship game from 2006 to 2015, aside from 2009 to 2007, either the national champion runner-up, or in some cases both of them, sent out a starting group full of more underclassmen than upperclassmen. We just talked about the 2014-15 Duke Blue Devils, but the championship runner-ups from the year prior, the Kentucky Wildcats, sent out an entire lineup of freshmen in the 2014 National Championship. If we look at the runner-ups for the National Championship once again, this time in 2013, it was the Michigan Wolverines who sent out more under than upperclassmen. The year before that, the 2012 National Champs, the Kentucky Wildcats, had a starting 5 completely made up of underclassmen. The 2011 national champion UConn Huskies did so as well. The 2010 runner-ups, the Butler Bulldogs, were the team with more under than upperclassmen in their 2010 starting group. I will say though, that as a member of Butler, Gordon Hayward nearly pulled off the greatest game winner in college basketball history. The North Carolina Tar Heels and Michigan State Spartans made the national championship game in 2009, and neither the champion Tar Heels or the runner-up Michigan State Spartans had more underclassmen than upperclassmen. In the 2008 National Championship, Kansas played Memphis and both teams only had one underclassman in their starting lineups. For Kansas, it was Darrell Arthur, and for Memphis, it was a man you may have heard of before by the name of Derrick Rose. Finally, we're going to touch on the dynasty Florida Gators, who were just one of 2 programs to win back-to-back national championships in the last 51 years after doing so in 2006 and 2007. The only 2 underclassmen in the 2007 National Championship game starting groups were both members of Ohio State, as they were Mike Conley and the first overall pick that year, Greg Oden. But the year prior, the national champion Gators, as well as their opponents, the UCLA Bruins, both started more underclassmen than upperclassmen. 4 underclassmen started for Florida, and 3 underclassmen started for UCLA. So while 7 of the 10 championship games from 2006 to 2015 saw one or both teams start more underclassmen in their lineup, that trend has clearly changed over the last 8 years, as like I mentioned, every team to make the championship game since 2016 started a lineup where more players than not have at least 2 years of playing experience. I will say though, the trend of freshmen and sophomores leading the way hasn't just been a thing since the one and done era. Looking back at some of the most iconic college basketball teams of all time, the 1991 national champion Duke Blue Devils had 3 underclassmen in their starting 5, as they started Bobby Hurley as a sophomore, Grant Hill as a freshman, and Thomas Hill as a sophomore, while their opponents, the Kansas Wildcats, sent out 3 seniors, a junior, and a sophomore in their starting group. But the young talent of the Duke Blue Devils was too much for the Kansas Wildcats that year. The 1981-82 North Carolina Tar Heels, led by James Worthy, Michael Jordan, and Sam Perkins, had 3 underclassmen in their starting lineup, as Jordan was a freshman, Sam Perkins was a sophomore, and Matt Doherty was a sophomore as well that year. And finally, the UCLA Bruins, led by the greatest college coach of all time, John Wooden, and a guy I got in my top 3 NBA players of all time, Lou Alcindor, aka Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, had a lineup of 4 sophomores and 1 junior in the 1966-67 season, when they won their first of 3 national championships together and the third of Wooden's 10 national championships. So while the method for winning has changed in the college basketball world over the last 8 years, a team from nearly 60 years ago was relying on their youth all the way back then. I'm not sure though if Vegas seems to know that over the last 8 years, experience needs to be in your equation to help you win the national championship rather than just freshman talent. Houston were the favorites last year, and they did start more upperclassmen than underclassmen, as they started 3 juniors, 1 senior, and 1 freshman. Kansas had the second best odds, while starting 3 upperclassmen and 2 underclassmen. Then the third best odds were Bama, who started 3 underclassmen, including 2 2023 first-round draft picks, one being the best player in college basketball last season, Brandon Miller, as well as Noah Clowney. I can understand the high odds around all 3 of those teams, but clearly Vegas didn't get the picks right, as UConn won last year's tournament, and like we showed before, started 3 upperclassmen. Back in 2022, Gonzaga was the betting favorite, and while I understand since they had 2 NBA-bound underclassmen, as well as Andrew Nembhard when he was a senior, clearly Vegas didn't get that pick right either. The second best odds belonged to Arizona, who started 4 sophomores and 1 junior. Then in third place was Duke, and while I understand as they had 5 NBA players on their roster, including Paolo Banchero, who was and is an incredible player, 4 underclassmen and 1 junior was of course only good enough to get Duke a Final Four appearance, which is good, but of course not the goal for any top seed in the NCAA tournament. It just simply seems that the model for winning has changed in the world of college basketball. But honestly, can I even say that was truly a proven way to win it all? Only 9 of the last 34 teams to play in the national championship game had more under than upperclassmen in their starting lineup. Only 4 of those teams actually won the national championship game, and the last one to do so was the 2014-15 Duke Blue Devils. While I absolutely loved watching some of those stacked Kentucky teams, despite not even being a Kentucky fan myself, such as the 2014-15 Wildcats, who went 38-0 before getting upset by Wisconsin, and the 2009-10 Wildcats, who had John Wall, Eric Bledsoe, Darius Miller, Patrick Patterson, and Boogie Cousins in their starting 5, neither of those teams fulfilled their goals of winning the national championship, and it kind of feels like that tournament in 2015 is when the stacking your roster strategy began to die out, even despite Duke winning it that same year with 4 freshmen in their starting group. Maybe the Zion, RJ, and Reddish Blue Devils could have broken that model if they were fully healthy in 2019, but of course that is simply just a what-if scenario. I hope from what we looked at today, you can see what all 14 teams in the last 7 national championship games have in common. And with Duke and Purdue being the only teams that made it to the Sweet 16 this year while starting more under than upperclassmen, we'll see if the upperclassmen model prevails or if one of those 2 teams can win the tournament and break the mold. I want to know in the comments what you think of the data I showed off here today, if you believe in this model, as well as your thoughts on this year's tournament and who will win. If you enjoyed the video, then I'd really appreciate if you could give it a like and subscribe if you're new to my channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I am out. Peace.